Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Center Podcast. I'm Emilia Zhivatovskaya, your host and founder of the Flourishing Center. We are training the change agents of the world and equipping them with research-based tools for healthy, happy, and successful living. And we're so grateful that you're here. Each episode features 3 sections. First is the Science Says section, where we summarize a recent research study and show you how to put the science into action. Next, we give you a research-based life hack with simple strategies for incorporating positive psychology into your life for greater well-being. And then our Practitioner Corner is where we interview someone who's out there living, breathing, and spreading positive psychology in their own unique way. Learn about how they're growing their personal and professional work and get inspired with strategies for how you might use positive psychology in your own life. Thanks for listening, and let's dive in. Thanks for tuning in. Today's Science Says is a research study that asks the question, what happens when you pair a person's personality with the personality of a job? How does that translate to their income? For our life hack, we explore a big question in a short period of time. How do you figure out your reason for being, your purpose in this world? And then for our Practitioner Corner, we have a really fun conversation with Kristen Caven, who's up to some really exciting work in the world, and you're going to love meeting her. So let's dive in. Today's research study is called Uncovering the Power of Personality to Shape Income, recently published in the Journal of Psychological Science. In this study, researchers took a German socioeconomic panel, which had data on over 18,970 individuals, and they looked at this data and identified what was the relationship between the type of job that a person had, and then what they call a person-job fit. How much did the job fit their personality? They also looked at their income, what was their mean level of income, and then what was the relationship between all of these factors, the employee's personality, the personality that's being required of them by the job, and their income. They looked at a variety of different careers, everything from being a firefighter to an interior decorator, working in government taxation versus being a religious professional. They looked at actors, directors, bookkeepers, film stage persons, and across the board found that the greater the overlap between the personality that's required of the job and the person's personality, the greater the satisfaction and also the higher the income. Their research shows that aside from one personality trait, all of the others showed that the higher there was a fit between the level of a person's personality trait and the level of that job personality demand, the higher the income, suggesting that it's important for people to explore having a good fit between what feels natural to them and the job that they are in. One of the things that I think is interesting is the researchers found that the average job-demanded emotional stability exceeded the average actual level of this trait within people. And I'll repeat that again. They say that the average job demanded emotional stability, which exceeded the average actual level of people's personality. This says that emotional stability is a scarce psychological resource in job contexts. And it might suggest that employers would benefit from training this skill within people, and that people could explore how they themselves can learn this psychological resource of emotional stability. Some of this might not sound like completely earth-shattering news to you, but I think it's a helpful step in the direction of inviting people to consider that their work can be more meaningful, that their work can be aligned with how they show up in the world, and that if things like income are an important factor, that they could explore how finding an alignment between how they show up in the world and the job that they want to pursue can actually lead to a greater income for them over time. And the study also suggests that it's worth investing in skills that help us train our sense of emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, and many of the psychological skills that we talk about in positive psychology. Today's life hack is about how to figure out your reason for being in the world. Now that is a huge question, isn't it? And the Japanese actually have a word for it. They call it Ikigai. The concept means a reason for being. And according to this principle, they separate out things that you love to do, things that you're good at doing, things that you can be paid for, and things that the world needs of you. And when you find the intersection between all of those four things, you have found your Ikigai. And what they identify is that you can find some blends of one or two, or even sometimes three of these factors. And when you mix different factors together, you find yourself having a different experience. But ideally, when you can find all four overlapping with one another, then you have found your reason for being in the world. And I want to go over some of these because they can help you in the way that you think about your own work in the world. And I invite you to consider, have you identified your reason for being? If you just take something that you can be paid for and something that you're good at, you have a profession. And if it's a profession that is also something that the world needs of you, then they identify it as something that you're going to feel comfortable with, but it will make you feel empty because you're being paid for it, you're good at it, it's needed of you, but you're going to feel like something is missing because you don't love it. Or you might have a vocation, and a vocation is something that you're being paid for, and it's something that the world needs of you, but you may not necessarily be good at it, and nor do you love it. So then it's just a vocation. But if you do love it, there might be excitement and complacency, but maybe a sense of uncertainty because while you are enjoying it, you doubt yourself. Maybe I'm not so cut out for this because it's not necessarily what you're good at. If you take something that the world needs of you and it's something you love, it becomes your mission in life. And if you're also good at it, it will be delightful and full. But you don't have wealth and abundance coming your way because you're not being paid for what you do. So it might be your mission statement, but it wouldn't be your Ikigai. If you combine something you love and something you're good at, then it becomes your passion. You love it, you're good at it. And if you happen to take something that you love and that you're good at and you're being paid for it, you might feel satisfied, but it can feel useless if it's not what the world needs of you. But ideally, when we find the intersection between all four, that is when we're fulfilled. So I invite you to answer this question for yourself. What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need of you? And how can you be paid for it and be gainfully employed by your passion, your purpose, and that which is meaningful for you in life? And if you haven't yet found your Ikigai, don't panic because it's not meant to be something that you have as much as something that you do. And so if you are in a place of exploring, know that you're not alone. Research shows that having meaning and purpose in one's life is correlated with life satisfaction. But finding it, uncovering it, usually comes with a little bit of stress, a little bit of unknowing. And I think if more people understood that it was natural to maybe look out into the abyss and say, what am I here for? What is my reason for being? Then more people would be committed to just exploring that process, knowing that it's an uncovering that takes time. So I invite you to enjoy the journey, not the destination, knowing that the journey will help you uncover all these different facets of yourself. Hi, friends. So this is a little bit different than we usually would do with our podcast interviewees. Normally, I would ask them a couple of questions ahead of time before we start recording, and then I'm able to sound super graceful when I'm introducing them. But when I asked Kristen some of the questions I typically ask, we ended up riffing on such a powerful conversation, something that we were just having so much fun exploring together that I said, you know what? Let's leave it in. So unlike our usual introduction, here's a little brief chat that Kristen and I had together before we started.
Okay, I graduated from CAP in May. I am I call myself a literary creative. Let me just go to my bio. I'm a literary and creative professional. Just since I graduated, I've started up the Flourishing Artist seminars in Oakland to help creatives like myself to learn how to flourish. And I have another website for that. There's a click from my website down on the right, The Flourishing Artist, and that'll take you right to that page. And there's another bio there that's a little bit more focused. Mm-hmm. Just because we talked a little bit about my bullying work on Friday, and I wasn't sure if that's what you were interested in or if...
Yeah, totally. It's just all of it.
Okay.
So here I can reference, you've written how many books now?
Written or co-written. You can say 8 books and musicals and plays. I'm also a blogger and I write literary essays, but you don't need my whole literary background. You can just say, I'm a literary artist.
Great. And what's something that would be like a little something you might not know about Kristen that's kind of fun or quirky about you?
Well, I teach Zumba, and my motto is sweat yourself silly. I also have a lot of. I'm like mostly quirks, actually. I'm like 95% quirks.
Like, how about we start with like what's normal?
Let's do that.
Here's something that's average about Kristen. This makes up about 5% of who she is, and everything else is quirky. I love that. Anything in particular that you want me to highlight? Like, would you want me to highlight the bullying antidote, the stuff you've been recently doing, or just play around and we'll riff off each other?
Well, I think we can riff off each other. I would like to sort of end up, I know you've got a creative side in you, and I'd like to talk a little bit about positive psychology for creatives, because that's sort of my area of excitement. And also, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about ADHD and, what that's like, because I do have an ADHD blog. And just like in a nutshell, my talking point, I think, to you would be that we have like 100% more mind chatter than a lot of people do. So I do some of my work around that, but most of my work around, just people with creative temperaments.
And do you coach them usually or teaching?
So I mostly, this word that they had, entertainment and education together, they came up with edutainment. Well, I'm like also about expressing my own literary work. So I do expressutainment. So I do like performance that teaches and entertains.
Love that. So I call myself a pracademicpreneur that offers edutainal experiences. So I'm with you.
See, I told you so. I need to write that down. Can you say it again?
Yeah, I'm a pracademicpreneur and I offer edutainal experiences.
Okay.
So educational, entertaining, and social, because I love bringing people together to interact into different, experiences and things that they do. So I call it edutainal.
That's nice. Very good. See, we're right there. I was also realizing, like, if I wanted to sound normal, I could call myself a social engineer. But like,
oh, because that's normal.
Doesn't that sound like a thing, though? Yeah. But I can talk about my work as a graphic designer that, like, ended up being almost like a therapist, and how I do consulting and coaching also around creative services or not creative services, but getting our ideas out there and putting ourselves out in the world, expressing ourselves. So I do consulting around expression and storytelling, and I also do coaching. But those are kind of the side things. My main focus is on teaching.
I love how you're like, and those 65,000 things I just listed that I do, they're not my main thing. They each have like a silver of a percent. There's so much I do.
Exactly.
So Kristen, I don't normally do this, but I've been recording everything we've been saying, and I feel like it's so yummy that I actually want to leave this section in and just dive right into our interview. How does that sound to you?
And then you'll do some creative editing on the back end.
Of course.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. Those of you who are just tuning in, I've been riffing with Kristen on how to introduce her. So the only thing I think that we've left out is that she's hailing to us from Oakland, California. And I'm so excited to have Kristen on our podcast because if you haven't been able to tell, she is just filled with zest, creativity, and passion for life as an individual. And I'm so excited to take a deeper dive with her around some of the yummy things she's up to in the world. So Kristen, thank you so much for being here with me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted.
Kristen, what brought you to positive psychology?
Well, I have to say positive psychology brought itself to me. I've actually been working in it for probably 25 years, doing co-writing with a community psychologist who is also my mother, who has been bringing positive parenting work to the world. I helped her edit all of her books and write her books and create her whole speaking platform so she could go out there and help parents find really wonderful ways to interact with their kids and have successful relationships their whole lives with their family. But after we completed our last book, I realized that I was still so curious about all of the stuff that we had been researching and that had come out. And when I discovered the Flourishing Center and met you, Amelia, I was just magically actually drawn into CAP. And it really was a little bit of magic because you moved it to my city and then I couldn't come and then you started a little late. So you put it right in my path. So it was kismet.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm glad that we were able to be like, there is absolutely no way you can say no to us. We're just gonna keep knocking at your door.
Exactly. You can't go around us anymore. You have to go through.
So what are some of the things that you are most excited about that are on your plate?
Well, the most amazing things have happened to me in this past year. I finished up my program in May, and right smack in the middle of it, I came into a new place in my life, like literally a place where I could work, this beautiful historic building right on Lake Merritt, which is the heart of Oakland, where I could actually sort of expand my creative work here. And at the same time, I was trying to work on my final project, and everything sort of came together, and I realized what I could do was create a program here for people like myself, for creative people. So I call it the Flourishing Artist program, and there's a lot of moving parts to it because I like to juggle. So I've been in different phases of launch, but it's all been very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to creating some wonderful experiences and teaching here and wellness.
Wow, Kristen, thank you. I can imagine just how rewarding it is to bring artists together and to offer them skills for flourishing. I think that artists get such a stigma that they are surrounded by this dark cloud in order to be an artist. I think back to when I was a visual artist. I still am, but much stronger of a visual artist when I was younger. And I kind of felt like in order to really be an artist, I had to wear black and smoke cigarettes and be really like pissed off at the world.
Disenchanted. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I felt like I was like a phony because I was actually really happy with my life and I just loved expressing myself. And it was like, I couldn't make that known because to really be an artist had to be like really dour. And I'm wondering if systems or belief systems around happiness and optimism are things that you face with artists.
Well, that is exactly, you just went right to the heart of what my work is about because, I do hang out with artists and we do get sarcastic and cynical about things, but so much of art is about suffering. And, it's like Buddha's brain, what we learn is like there's suffering and then there's like self-imposed suffering, right? We all go through pain and difficulty, but we don't need to pile it on ourselves. And I think there's also another type of creativity that is just about bringing happiness and joy. And it's actually what people seek out. People seek out art because it makes them feel better. It gives them meaning. And exploring this has been fascinating because I've been looking for the science about art, and there's not a whole lot of research out there, but what there is says that art is really, really a huge wellness factor, both viewing it and experiencing it when other people do it and doing it yourself, creativity. Both of those things are huge wellness interventions. And yet artists operate kind of outside of the world. Artists don't have the same support structures that you might get if you go into a corporation. You don't have mentoring and coaching unless you're in an art school. You can afford to go get your MFA and then maybe you get that, but then you don't know how to run a business. So there's a lot of support that artists really need. We are just sort of defined by our generosity. We have this desire to bring things forth into the world, and it's been very hard to know what to do with it, where to put it, who wants to hear it, who's going to help us. So yeah, there's so much to talk about. And when you look at art kind of historically, I remember reading a book about all the best American writers. Well, guess what? They were all alcoholics. And that's not true anymore. I think we've learned a lot about alcoholism. We've learned a lot about addiction, and making art in itself is a form of addiction that you have to manage. But it doesn't have to ruin our lives. It can just really nourish our lives. It can really nourish everyone around us.
Wow, that is such a powerful concept. Particularly, I've always thought about the research on broaden and build theory and how important it is to be in a curious, broadened emotional space when creating. And I've developed a theory that I wonder if it's been tested by science, but I remember, because I've gotten this question a lot when I'm giving workshops, especially in the early days, people would say, well, what about if you're saying that in order for people to be creative, they need to be in a positive emotional space, how about all of these artists who are so known for mental illness, or they're so known for being depressive and so dark? And I would say that, yes, they might have been known for being in dark places, but when they were actually creative, they either needed to be in a neutral place. That's usually what we experience when we are in the zone and in the flow, or in the actual creation process, they're quite broadened. And so we need to separate out the creative process from maybe what people were known for. But the actual process of creating, if anything, broadens them and starts to boost their positive emotion. Hence, it becomes addicting, or it becomes the thing that you can't not do.
Wow. Say more. That's so fascinating.
Well, I think about how times where I'm feeling down, the last thing I really want to do is create. And that sometimes if we're in pain, just we instinctively want to help ourselves feel better. So many people will self-soothe through alcohol or through drugs, or they'll self-soothe in other ways. And the creative process is so healing, whether it be just getting it out of our head or out of our body or out of our mind. And so once we start creating, once we start doing it, right, then we shift ourselves into a different way of being. And
yes.
And the process is healing as a result of it.
Yes. I think one of the first things that we read in the CAPS program was something about just the intervention of writing, of narrative, and just writing about what you're going through, because it switches us from being the victim to being our own observer, to being our own creator. And creativity in itself is very soothing and very empowering. And it's so interesting. There's this thing where, we're feeling we're in a dark place, but when we write about it, we get ourselves out of the dark place. But then we have this piece of artwork that is all about being in a dark place, even though we've saved ourselves from that in a way.
Yeah. And I would imagine that another place where you work so much with artists, as I live here in New York, and I see many of the performing artists that we come across just needing so much resilience, because that world can be so difficult. You've established yourself so much in this work. You've written plays, you've performed yourself, but I would imagine that you're able to offer resilience skills to creative artists in a way that they may not be exposed to otherwise.
Oh, there's so much criticism and comparison that comes with the territory. In my first workshops, I had people just say, what are the things that artists that we struggle with? And that was a big one, is just constantly, the rejection that we face. And, we talk about social comparison, but there's also this, competitive thing, and artists don't want to compete. They want to collaborate. And the business part is difficult, but I don't teach the craft and I don't teach the business. But what I really do teach is absolutely what you're saying, is the resilience skills. One of my early lectures I was working on was called Self-Esteem for Rejects, because we face so much rejection when we're trying to get our work out there and trying to find the right place, the sweet spot, the audience that really loves us, our tribe, and how we can get through that, the self-talk that we can do, the structures we can create around ourselves to support ourselves in that process.
And I would imagine that you probably do a lot of work in helping them understand the difference between fixed and growth mindset, because when they get rejected, the importance of not personalizing it. Like, I'm not a reject, I just got rejected, right? And it's such a difference, because it's so easy to personalize it.
Absolutely. So, actually, the first thing that I start talking about in my seminars is the choice map, because I start out with this arrow that, because we're told that we have success on the up end and failure on the other end, and how this way of looking at the world, this duality of looking at the world, is just, it's so judgmental and such a fixed mindset. But then moving into the path of curiosity, which creative people are actually very good at, and reframing the failures as challenges that we can work with as creative challenges. Another thing I think you'd love about what I teach is the wellness scale. Where at one end you have depression and the other hand you have flourishing. I changed that somewhere in the middle. I put floundering, because in a way failure equals depression in an artist's eyes. So it's a whole scale of funny F words, from failure to floundering to flourishing, and figuring out how we move from one space into another with all those, and also just radically self-acceptance where we are. Where are we in the process? And it's hard when we're we're being pushed all the time by our muses and by our opportunities to just say, yeah, I'm not there yet. Or, oh, I'm so past that, because there's different stages of becoming an artist.
Yeah.
It's a very spiritual path.
That's beautiful. And I love how you are putting floundering somewhere between languishing to flourishing, or wherever it is that you put it in. I would imagine
it's kind of like languishing is like floundering.
Yeah, but I like how I like me a good alliteration.
I know, right?
I feel like you could put the F of figuring it out, sandwiching all of them. It'd be like depression, figuring it out, floundering, figuring it out, flourishing, figuring it out. Because that F of figuring it out, it's a constant. And I think that so many people think about any of these states as places that you get to, and that once you get there, suddenly you're fine and you're done, as opposed to really emphasizing you're always figuring it out.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Can I use that?
Please do.
Okay.
It's like you can interject figuring it out anywhere. It's like glue.
Anywhere. Well, and that just like pops you onto the learning path, right? Figure it out.
Yeah. And Kristen, I know I was so inspired by what you've been up to in the world of anti-bullying. Can you tell us more about that project?
Oh, sure. So this was the last book with my mother. Her name is Dr. Louise Hart. She's spoken around the world as a positive parenting expert. And she was actually approached to write a book on bullying using her previous book called The Winning Family. And she just wanted to write it with me. And I guess I have to say that, how do I say it? I've been talking about this so much. We created basically a handbook for parents to help understand what bullying is and help to prevent it, because so much of it is taught in families. And we put positive psychology right in the middle of the book, and then use that as sort of a framework for positive parenting and teaching your children the growth mindset, and just all of the softer, more nurturing ways you can be with a child to understand and be compassionate with what they're going through. And so we just had this wonderful project where we were able to receive a huge donation of these books from the publisher and give them out in Oakland. And the book is called The Bullying Antidote. And somewhere in writing it, I had to be creative and say, we need a word, that describes this superpower. So we came up with this idea of Zorgos, which is the Esperanto word for I will take care, as the superpower that is the antidote to bullying. Whenever you have Zorgos, you can't have bullying dynamics. So that was a really wonderful project. There's information about it. People can go to zorgosproject.org, and that's spelled Zorgos, and read about what we did there. The book is still available, but we've given away all the free copies. And at the very end of our project, we held the Zorgos Awards. And this is also something anybody can do, where you gather together people in your community who are doing amazing work in terms of solutions. And we nominated a whole bunch of people who we just really feel are getting it right, some of whom we actually used as examples when we were writing our book. And then we just sort of highlighted the positive psychology concepts that they were all using. And these are all the antidote to bullying. Because when you have respect and we have a culture of caring and a culture of curiosity, you don't get into those ugly, nasty power dynamics.
Wow, that is so, so incredibly inspiring. A culture of curiosity, a culture of caring, and what an incredible way to honor people who are working in this world. I would imagine that for them, it's just so second nature to be doing this and to be acknowledged and to help them savor that they're transforming the world in this way is such a great thing.
Well, the funnest part is we decided to give them awards with gold capes. So when you actually get a cape, that is a great acknowledgement of the work that you're doing, because there really are superheroes among us.
Oh, that's so cool. And I know that you've got another project coming up in the works in 2018 called The Fountain of You. What's that all about?
Oh, well, so this is, I'm putting on a wellness week at this club where I work. And I'm going to start out by talking about a flourishing future, because it's a historic club, but we want it to go far into the future. And they usually have a spa day here, but I said, no, we need a bigger concept. And so Wellness Week, we're just going to have speakers on all aspects of wellness and have our fitness classes open. And I'm going to be working, I'm so excited, with someone I met in CAP. She's going to be doing a presentation called Meet Your Microbiome, and a panel on the all the microbiota of the gut and our skin and, our mouth and all the different, the living systems that we are, and just bring in her new approaches to health, or not her, but these new approaches to health that really understand our humanity.
That is so cool. And I know that you have been living and breathing this work for over 2 decades now. And so I would imagine that there's so many things about this, it just comes second nature. But I'm curious, what about positive psychology has made the most personal impact on you?
Just the way that science is coming to affirm and detail exactly how all these good cultural practices, all our good human nature is good for us. What I love about positive psychology is it takes so much of the chatter out of it, the debate, when we actually have data and when we actually have proof and research that these things are real and important. I guess I really often come back to just our brain. And once we understand, what our brains are designed for and what they're good at and what they're no good at, I think that just is the most helpful thing in terms of really just becoming so much better at everything that we do. When I do my, what do we call them, expredutainment, my seminars and my classes, I have these positive psychology themes that are brought up in research. And when I talk about the triune brain, I talk about the elephant in the room, because there's this culture of completely disregarding nature and going on theories of what should work, economically and, mathematically and in various abstract systems. But when we use those ways of thinking to look at just taking care of ourselves, that's like half the conversation that we're not having. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I just really appreciate that there's a coming together of all of the soft, squishy, creative, cultural, literary, language arts world and the science STEM, world that sort of comes together for me in positive psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It's holistic.
Absolutely. I know that you mentioned earlier also an interest in the ADHD community and the integration of positive psychology. Would you speak more about how you've been bridging those worlds?
Sure. I've been doing a blog on ADHD for about 5 years now or more, and it's just been such a fascinating exploration, not only of my own mind, but of how this particular type of neurology works. I think those of us who have it and see it kind of as a superpower really resent the whole disorder label of it, because there's certain things we are definitely not good at, but there's other things that other people just can't do. And one thing that I discovered while blogging is the connection between ADHD, which people know a lot more about it now, but I think one of the most recent explanations that really clarifies what it is we have these two systems. One is for gathering in information and the other one is for filtering and focusing it out. And in the ADHD mind, we can't ever really shut out the gathering in information mind. And when we do, it's like it's slammed shut and we're really hyper-focused. So our minds are there's a lot more mind chatter than most people have, and understanding how to work with it is, it can be done medically, which is very, very helpful, but it's also really helps to have this new language. When we give the language of positive psychology to people who are experiencing this, it really helps just understand that, we have the same problems that everybody else has, just kind of more on this edge and less on that edge. And I think that's true for anybody who's got anxiety or depression or any sort of slant that makes them not feel at ease in the world. One of the things I discovered that was so fascinating to me was, do you remember, the Myers-Briggs test?
Of course, yeah.
Yes, to find out that the qualities that make up this certain designation called the creative temperament are also the qualities that define the ADHD brain. And so I can't say that they're one and the same, but I just find it just a fascinating way to look at the world.
That is fascinating. And what empowering reframes compared to something that can very easily make people feel disempowered.
Yes, and judged and self-conscious and shame. And there's a lot that goes with it, with any feeling differently abled.
And Kristen, you know that our motto here at the Flourishing Center and in the field of mind-body medicine is that self-care is healthcare. And what are some of the self-care practices that nourish you?
Oh, what a great question. And what a great motto. Well, let's see. I think probably my most important one is exercise. I found a way to exercise regularly and in a way that brings me incredible joy and happiness and creativity. And another thing I've found is really important is socializing. We're social creatures. And I've found that actually scheduling friendship time into the week, as I'm scheduling my business, I have to actually schedule like a walk with a girlfriend or some party that I go to or some sort of social connection, either in nature so I can get a nature fix or some, a meal where I can, experience pleasure and savoring, but definitely where I can have conversation. So that's actually a very important thing for my mental health. Quiet time and rest, where I can just not get out of bed until 2:00 and I can have my laptop and I can self-listen and journal or just kind of let my mind wander and do whatever I need to do is incredibly generative and also very relaxing. And, giving myself time to experience story is really important for me. Movies, reading, even storytelling with friends. I just find story is such an important part of having a healthy mind and life. When I had a concussion once, that was what healed me, was actually just being in the dark and watching movies. And I could feel my brain re-knitting when all these threads of meaning were, woven together in a story. So there's something magical about story. And I think the other most important thing is just really making it a priority to create happy experiences. I used to go through life going, okay, what just happened? And then, oh, what's happening right now? And then I got to the point where I thought, well, what do I want to make happen? And learning how to actually create the time to prepare for the experiences that I want to have. That's just been a huge shift in my life towards greater happiness and flourishing.
It's such a beautiful example of drinking as we pour, especially I think about the storytelling side of it, that in order for you to have your creative juices to tell stories and to nourish others, that you let yourself be inspired and filled up with other people's art and other people's storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for taking this time with us, Kristen. I'm so inspired by what you're doing in the world and the impact that you're making.
Thank you, Amelia. This was so much fun talking to you. And it's so great feeling like I'm part of this huge flow of individuals who are connected to you and your program and CAP and MAP and all over the world, this whole idea that we need a World Happiness Report.
It's a great time to be alive.
It is.
Kristen, how can people learn more about your work and the various things you're up to?
Well, I have about 20 blogs and Facebook pages, but they're all sort of amalgamated at KristenCaven.com. If you look on on one part, there's an ad for my Flourishing Artist program if you want to learn more about that. And I have a newsletter you can sign up. It's inconsistent, but I'm really good at being consistently inconsistent, but it's worth it when it comes. Yeah, so there's just a lot of stuff on my website. People can see what I've been doing and links to everything and all my books and my workshops and my parties I throw. So let's just get connected.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And thank you all for listening. Please check out Kristen's work. She's doing such fun stuff in the world. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you've enjoyed the podcast and hope that it has inspired you to think about these concepts of meaning, of alignment, of joy, and purposeful living. And until we meet again, may you each find your flourishing center.